The year is 2012. The cameras are all gone. The red carpets are rolled up. We are inside this stark, fluorescent lit courtroom in Los Angeles.
Mm.
And standing there, looking completely alone, is a man the world knows as a Hollywood heartthrob. We're talking about Jason Patric,
The Lost Boys.
the vampire from The Lost Boys, the hero from Speed 2. But in this moment, he isn't fighting for a movie role, and he is definitely not fighting a movie villain. He's fighting to prove that he isn't a total stranger to his own son.
And the stakes really couldn't be higher because the judge is looking right at him. A man who has changed diapers, paid for preschool, lived with this child, and is about to legally declare him a sperm donor.
A sperm donor. I just want to pause on that for a second. Meaning, in the eyes of the law, he has zero parental rights. He's what, a legal ghost?
Exactly. No custody, no visitation, no right to even know where his child is. It raises this terrifying question. How does a devoted dad become a donor overnight?
And how did his refusal to accept that label end up changing California law forever? That is exactly what we are unpacking today.
Welcome to the deep dive.
So I was looking at this stack of documents you sent over about Jason Patric, and honestly, it reads more like a legal thriller than, a celebrity gossip column.
It really does.
I think most people remember the headlines, but the actual details of the law here are just mind-bending.
It's fascinating because it's not just a story about a bad breakup. This is a story about biology versus intent. It's about a loophole in the law from the 1970s and a massive collision between father's rights and reproductive autonomy.
Okay, let's set the scene. The headline here is essentially the love story that turned into a legal nightmare.
We have Jason Patric and his ex-girlfriend, Danielle Schreiber.
Right.
They weren't just a fling, were they?
No, and to understand the legal mess, you have to understand the relationship dynamic. Patric and Schreiber dated on and off for about 10 years. It was a long, complicated history. But by 2009, they weren't romantically involved. They'd broken things off. However, Schreiber really wanted a child.
And Patric steps up to help. He does.
Yeah.
Patric had actually undergone surgery in 2007 for some fertility issues. He offered to donate his sperm so Schreiber could conceive via IVF.
Okay, but here's where it gets really sticky, and honestly, this part shocked me. Patric originally wrote a letter stating he was not ready to be a father.
Correct. And this letter became the smoking gun later on. He requested anonymity. He didn't even put his name on the birth certificate.
Why?
He was very specific about wanting to avoid, paparazzi intrusion into the child's life. At that specific moment in 2009, the intent, at least on paper, was that he was strictly a donor.
Which seems clear-cut, right? If I sign a piece of paper saying I'm not the dad, I shouldn't be surprised when the law says, okay, you're not the dad.
In a contract law class, sure. But family law is different because life is messy. Life doesn't always follow what's on a piece of paper.
Right.
So Gus is born in December 2009, and then the plot twists.
They get back together.
The relationship rekindled. After Gus was born, Patric and Schreiber got back together. And for roughly 2 years, they lived as a family unit.
And we are not talking about him just popping in on weekends to say hi. I was reading through the court documents, and the sources are filled with these specific, very dad details. He wasn't just there, he was present. He was buying bagels and balloons for the homecoming. He set up a nursery in his own home. He was paying for preschool tuition.
And perhaps most importantly, the child, Gus, called him Dada. Schreiber encouraged this. They presented themselves to the world, to the school, to their friends as a family.
There's this one detail that really stuck with me. Patric was doing a Broadway play that championship season, and when Gus was hospitalized, Patric flew cross-country immediately to be there.
Right.
That is not sperm donor behavior. That is dad behavior.
It is. But in 2012, they break up for good. And things turn incredibly ugly, incredibly fast. Schreiber cuts off all access, and her lawyers pull out a legal weapon that Patric just never saw coming.
This is the loophole everyone talks about.
It's California Family Code, Section 7613B. Now, let me break this down because it is crucial to understanding why he lost that first round. This statute essentially says that if an unmarried man donates sperm to a doctor for someone else's artificial insemination, he is treated in law as if he were not the natural father.
Wait, so because they weren't married and because a doctor was involved in the insemination, the default setting is not the dad.
Yes. The law was originally written to protect sperm donors from being sued for child support.
Ah.
Imagine if you donated to a sperm bank, and 18 years later, a kid shows up demanding tuition.
Mm.
The law was designed to prevent that.
Okay, that makes sense for a stranger donating to a bank. But this was her ex-boyfriend of 10 years.
The statute doesn't care about the relationship history. It cares about the method of conception and the marital status. Unless, and this is the kicker, there is a written agreement saying otherwise, signed before conception.
Which they didn't have. Because at the time, he wrote that letter saying he wasn't ready.
Exactly. So in 2013, they go to trial. The court looks at the statute, looks at the lack of a preconception agreement, and rules in favor of Schreiber. The judge declared Patric was legally just a donor. No custody, no visitation.
That is absolutely wild. Imagine being data for 2 years, having a room for your kid in your house, and then a judge bangs a gavel and says, actually, based on a law from the 70s, you're just a donor. Goodbye.
He was legally erased from his son's life. It was a very strict interpretation of the text.
But Jason Patric was not going to go quietly. He was about to launch a legal Hail Mary that would, it would split Hollywood in half.
And this is where the legal strategy shifts from biology to conduct.
So 2013 was a bust. He lost. He hasn't seen his son in months. What does he do?
He appeals. But his legal team knows they can't win on the sperm donor statute. The law is just too clear. No written agreement, no dad. So they pivot.
Okay.
They sue under completely different law. Family Code, Section 7611.
The presumed parent statute.
Precisely. This law is fascinating. It basically says if you receive a child into your home and openly hold them out as your own, the law presumes you are a parent.
So it's basically the walks like a duck, quacks like a duck law. If you act like a dad, the law can see you as a dad.
That's a really good way to put it. The argument was, okay, maybe the sperm donor law says I'm not the dad biologically, but the presumed parent law says I am the dad because of how I acted for 2 years.
But does that override the donor law, though? Isn't the specific law about sperm donation supposed to trump the general law about parenting?
That was the million-dollar question for the appellate court in 2014, and they made a massive history-changing ruling.
What'd they say?
They ruled that the donor law prevents rights based on sperm, meaning you can't just show up and say, that's my DNA, give me the kid.
Right.
But it does not prevent rights based on parenting.
Wow. That is a huge distinction.
It is. They effectively said that biology and parenting were two different legal tracks. Patric could still win if he could prove he was a parent in practice.
And boy, did he have the receipts. The retrial was all about that evidence we mentioned earlier. The sources mention an engraved trophy from his play with Gus's name on it.
Right, and testimony from friends like Kiefer Sutherland, who saw them interacting as father and son.
The tuition payments.
The fact that he was paying for things. The fact that he had a room for the boy in his house.
So in late 2014, the verdict comes down. And Jason Patric was legally declared Gus's father.
He won the title.
Yep.
He went from donor to dad in the eyes of the law.
But this wasn't just happening in a courtroom bubble. While he was fighting for custody, he was also fighting a massive PR war. And this is where things get complicated politically.
This is the star power aspect of our deep dive.
Yeah.
Patric launched the Stand Up for Dust campaign. He founded an organization to help alienated parents.
Right.
And because he's Jason Patric, he didn't just have a big sale.
No, he had an army. Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, John Hamm, Mel Gibson, Sarah Silverman, they were all showing up for fundraisers. And they framed this as a fight against parental alienation.
Which is a very sympathetic narrative, father cut off from son. But we have to look at the opposition here because this wasn't a one-sided victory. It wasn't just everyone cheering for Jason.
Right, got political. Patric pushed for a bill, SB 115, often called the Patric Bill, which would have codified this idea that donors can claim rights if they act like parents. And guess who opposed it?
The National Organization for Women, or NOW, Planned Parenthood, and adoption lawyers.
See, that feels counterintuitive to me at first glance. Why would progressive organizations like NOW and Planned Parenthood oppose a dad wanting to be a dad? Isn't having two parents generally seen as a good thing?
It's not about this specific dad. It's about the precedent. They were terrified of the slippery slope.
Okay.
Think about it from the perspective of a single mother or, say, a lesbian couple.
Go on.
Let's say a lesbian couple asks a male friend to donate sperm. They sign a contract. You are the donor. We are the parents. Everyone agrees. But then the donor comes over for birthdays. He buys the kid a bike. He takes the kid to the zoo a few times.
He holds the child out as his own.
Exactly. If the Patric Bill passed as written, that donor could turn around 3 years later and say, hey, I've been acting like a dad, so now I want custody. I want weekends.
Oh, I see. That would be a nightmare. It would basically destabilize the families of single mothers and LGBTQ plus couples. They'd never know if their donor was going to suddenly become a co-parent against their will.
Precisely. They called it a threat to reproductive autonomy. They wanted the written contract to be the final word, not the messy, subjective, conduct. They argued that if you allow conduct to override contracts, you make it way too risky for women to use known donors.
That is a really tough ethical knot. On one hand, you have Patric, who clearly loved the kid and was invited into the role. On the other hand, you have the safety and stability of thousands of other families who rely on those donor contracts.
And that's why the bill stalled. The legislature had to balance those rights. But while the politics were high-minded, the personal battle between Patric and Schreiber got incredibly down and dirty.
Yeah, we have to talk about the almond butter incident. We can't paint this as a pure fairy tale.
No, this is where the celebrity gloss really wears off, and we see just how toxic this custody battle became.
So, Schreiber obtained a restraining order, and the details are specific. She alleged that Patric threw a jar of almond butter at her because she didn't close it properly.
She also alleged he hit her with a phone. These were serious accusations of domestic violence.
And how did that affect the case? He's already been declared the dad, right?
Yeah, he is the dad. But custody is different. The court found that he had disturbed the peace, which triggered a specific legal presumption, California Family Code, Section 3044.
What's that?
Basically, if you have a finding of domestic abuse, the court presumes it's unsafe for you to have joint custody.
Wait, so he spends millions of dollars, goes to the appellate court, changes the interpretation of the law, wins the title of father, and then gets blocked from seeing the kid because of the domestic violence finding.
Not blocked entirely, but severely restricted. He had to jump through massive hoops. He had to complete a batterer's intervention program, anger management counseling, parenting classes.
It wasn't just a happy, you're a dad, here's your son moment. It was messy.
Very messy. In fact, in 2017, the appellate court actually slapped the trial judge on the wrist again, saying the judge was premature in granting joint custody before verifying Patric had fully finished his counseling.
So even years later, they were still arguing over the schedule and whether he had checked all the boxes.
It took years. It took millions of dollars. It took a level of persistence that most people simply cannot afford.
But we did promise a resolution, because if we fast forward to today, the picture is very different.
It is. After all the lawsuits, the appeals, the almond butter, the bills, Jason Patric is frequently seen in Los Angeles with Gus, who's now a teenager.
And from the reports, he looks like a totally different guy. The sources describe him with a gray beard, glasses, attending church and community events with his son.
He's embracing the role of a single dad. Gus is with him. They have a relationship.
It's kind of beautiful in a gritty way. The Hollywood heartthrob is now just a dad with a gray beard doing the mundane stuff he fought so hard for.
It proves that the holding out as a parent wasn't just a legal strategy. He really wanted to be there. And he did eventually overcome the presumption against him by doing the work the court demanded.
So, from loophole to law, did Patric actually change the rules for everyone else, or is this just a one-off celebrity anomaly?
He did, but not with his original bill. The conversation he started led to real change. Eventually, in 2018, a bill called AB 2684 passed.
What did that do?
It modernized the Uniform Parentage Act. It made it much easier for unmarried couples and LGBTQ plus families to secure parentage through a voluntary declaration of parentage without having to go to court.
Oh, wow.
It essentially fixed the gap that Patric fell into, ensuring that intent and conduct are better recognized while still trying to protect those donor boundaries we talked about.
So his nightmare actually helped clarify things for future families.
It did. It's a significant legacy.
This whole story really makes you think about what defines a parent. Is DNA, is it a signature on a contract? Or is it the act of showing up?
That's the core question. We frame this as a victory for a father who wanted to be involved. But I want to leave the listener with that tension we discussed.
The tension between the contract and the conduct.
Exactly. If a written contract says one thing, I'm a donor, I want anonymity, but love and daily actions say another, which one should the law respect?
It feels like the law wants certainty, but human relationships are inherently uncertain.
And does this ruling make it riskier for single parents to accept help from friends? If letting a donor change a diaper can lead to a 10-year custody battle, Does that help or hurt the modern family?
That is the big question. It seems like Patrick won his battle, but the war over how we define family in the courts is far from over.
Absolutely. As families get more modern and complex, the laws from the 1970s just can't keep up.
Well, that gives us plenty to chew on. Thanks for breaking down the legal maze for us.
Always a pleasure.
And for everyone listening, if you're fascinated by how these high-stakes dramas impact real-world laws, make sure you're subscribed. We've got some incredible stories lined up where we pull apart the headlines you think you know.
You've been listening to StarScope Report, where Jordan and Jamie uncover the stories shaping Hollywood, music, and pop culture. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that keep the stars shining.